The factory manager heard a baby crying in the warehouse. The secret shocked everyone. Richard Johnson was making his final rounds for the night at the Johnson Shoe Factory when he heard a strange sound coming from the back warehouse. A faint, almost muffled cry that made his heart race. When he opened the heavy door to the unused space, he saw something that would change his life forever. Inside a cardboard box among yellowed blankets lay a baby just a few months old, whimpering softly. "Dear Lord," Richard murmured, his hands trembling as he approached the child. The 45-year-old man, known for his sternness and emotional distance, felt something break inside his chest. He had never held a baby in his life. His wife Margaret had lost 2 babies in their early years of marriage, and after that, they never tried again. "Who did this to you, little one?" he whispered, carefully picking up the child. The baby stopped crying immediately, as if sensing it was finally safe. Richard noticed the blankets were hand-embroidered, with delicate stitching that looked familiar. A small tag sewn into one bore a date, March 15th. His blood ran cold. March 15th. Exactly 9 months after the day Margaret had left home without explanation, leaving only a note saying she needed time. She had returned 3 weeks later, but never said where she'd been. Richard tried calling the authorities from the warehouse phone, but the line had been disconnected months ago for unpaid bills. The factory was in its worst crisis in 20 years, and he could barely pay the few remaining employees. "I'll take you home for tonight," he told the baby, wrapping it tighter in the blankets. "We'll sort this out properly tomorrow." When he got home, his daughter Emily was waiting in the living room. At 28, she had become a determined and practical woman, nothing like the dreamy girl she once was. In her hands, she held a folder of documents. "Dad, we need to talk about the factory. The creditors are—" Emily stopped mid-sentence when she saw the baby in her father's arms. "What is that? I found it in the warehouse. Someone left it there." Emily approached slowly, and when she saw the blankets, her expression changed completely. Her face turned pale as paper. "Dad, these blankets, I know them." "What do you mean?" "They're Grandma Helen's. She made them when Mom was pregnant the first time. I remember seeing them in what would have been the baby's room." Richard sank heavily onto the couch, the baby still in his arms. Helen was Margaret's mother, who had passed 5 years ago. She had always been close to her daughter and son-in-law. But why would these blankets be with a stranger's baby in the factory warehouse? Before Emily could answer, Margaret walked through the front door. She had just finished her shift at the hospital, where she'd worked as a nurse since returning to school years ago. Seeing the scene in the living room, she dropped her purse. "Richard, where did that baby come from?" Her question was so quiet it was almost inaudible. Margaret approached slowly, as if seeing a ghost. "Someone left it in the factory warehouse, with your mother's blankets." Richard watched her closely, searching for a reaction. Margaret sat beside her husband and reached out. Richard handed her the baby, and it was as if the child recognized her touch. It stopped squirming and looked straight at her. "He has green eyes," Margaret murmured, tears welling. "Just like mine." The next day, Richard arrived early at the factory, hoping to find clues about who had left the baby. That's when he saw Mrs. Gladys, the company's longest-serving employee, nervously rummaging through the warehouse. "Good morning, Mrs. Gladys. Looking for something?" The 60-year-old woman nearly jumped out of her skin. Gladys had worked at the factory for 15 years, always discreet and reliable. But at that moment, she seemed extremely nervous. "Oh, Mr. Richard, I was just organizing here. Yesterday, I forgot my bag and—" "Mrs. Gladys, yesterday I found a child here, a baby. Do you know anything about it?" The woman's face turned white as chalk. She leaned on a shelf and began to feel sick. "Calm down, I'll get some water." Richard rushed to help the employee. After a few minutes, when Gladys had recovered, Richard pressed the question. "I need to know the truth. This baby could be in danger." Gladys looked around as if afraid someone might hear. "Mr. Richard, I couldn't tell you. I promised to keep it a secret, but my niece Jessica is desperate." "Your niece?" "She had a baby 3 months ago. She hid it from everyone, even me. She only told me last week when she couldn't take care of him alone anymore." Richard sat on an old chair in the storage room. "Dear listener, If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us just starting out. Now, back to the story. Why did she hide the pregnancy? Jessica is only 19. She works as a cleaning lady in 3 houses to help her family. The baby's father, he disappeared when he found out about the pregnancy. And why did she bring the child here? Gladys lowered her eyes, ashamed. Jessica has been working the night shift here at the factory for 2 months. She uses a different name because she's afraid they'll find out she's underage. I got her the job. Richard processed the information. There was a night shift worker he didn't know about, and she was underage. On top of that, she'd left a baby in his storage room. Where is Jessica now? At home, desperate. When she heard someone found the baby, she panicked. She just wanted a safe place to leave Michael for a few hours while she worked. Michael? That's the baby's name. She named him after her grandfather, who was a very good man. Richard felt his chest tighten. Michael was also his father's name, the man who had built the factory from scratch in the 80s. I need to talk to her. She's scared, Mr. Richard. She's afraid Child Protective Services will take her baby away. I won't let that happen. I just want to understand the situation. That afternoon, Gladys brought Jessica to the factory. The young woman was thin, with big, frightened eyes. When she saw Richard, she began to cry. I'm sorry, Mr. Richard. I had nowhere else to go. My mother works as a housekeeper far from home and only comes back on weekends. My father hasn't spoken to me since he found out about the baby. Calm down, Jessica. No one will hurt you or your son. I just want to know how I can help. The girl told her story between sobs. She'd gotten pregnant by her boyfriend, Jason, who worked at an auto repair shop. When she told him about the pregnancy, he said he wasn't ready to be a father and disappeared from town. I worked while pregnant until I couldn't hide my belly anymore. After Michael was born, I tried to go back to working for families, but no one wants a housekeeper with a baby. And how did you find out about the job here? Mrs. Gladys is my mother's cousin. She knew I was struggling and offered me a few hours of cleaning work on the night shift. Richard realized Gladys had created an unofficial job to help her niece, something he hadn't authorized, but at the same time, he admired the employee's kindness. And the blankets? How did you get my mother-in-law's blankets? Jessica looked confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Those blankets came with the baby supplies I got from the health clinic. Richard felt a chill in his stomach. If the blankets had reached Jessica through the health clinic, it meant someone had donated them. And the only person who would have those specific blankets was Margaret. That night, Richard confronted his wife at home while Michael slept in the guest room they had set up. Margaret, I need you to tell me the truth about those blankets. What truth? Did you donate your mother's blankets to the health clinic? Margaret looked away, nervously fidgeting with her hands. Richard. Margaret, this girl has worked at my factory for 2 months and suddenly a baby shows up with your mother's blankets. That's no coincidence. Fine, I donated the blankets 3 months ago. I was sorting through Mum's things and couldn't look at them without remembering everything we lost. Why didn't you tell me? Because every time we talk about the babies we lost, you shut down for 3 days. It was easier to just donate everything and be done with it. Richard sat beside his wife on the couch. Margaret, do you think this baby showed up here by accident? What are you saying? Maybe it's a second chance. For us, for that girl, for everyone. Margaret looked at her husband with tears in her eyes. Richard, are you suggesting we adopt Michael? I'm suggesting we help Emily in a way that's good for everyone. She can live here, work at the factory officially, and we can help raise Michael. What if she doesn't want to? Then we respect her decision, but at least we offer. The next morning, Richard called Jessica and Mrs. Gladys into his office for a talk. The initial proposal was simple. Jessica could live in the guest house on the factory property, which had been empty for years, work officially as an employee, and get help caring for Michael. I don't understand, said Jessica, suspicious. Why would you do this for me? Because everyone deserves a chance. And because my wife and I lost 2 babies and know the value of a child. But I can't afford rent. The rent would be deducted from your paycheck little by little, no rush. and Margaret can help with Michael while you're working." Jessica looked at Mrs. Gladys, who gave an encouraging nod. "And what would I do at the factory?" "Start with cleaning, but also learn other jobs. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll be one of our best employees." "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But don't worry, Michael is safe with us while you decide." That same afternoon, something unexpected happened. Emily showed up at the factory with a worried expression. "Dad, I need to tell you something about the documents I brought yesterday." "What documents?" "The creditors' papers. There's something I didn't tell you yet." Richard stopped what he was doing and focused on his daughter. "The factory's main creditor is the Thompson family. And yesterday I found out that Jason Thompson, the son of the materials company owner, works at an auto repair shop here in town." "So?" "Dad, don't you think it's strange that right now a baby shows up whose father's name is Jason and works at a repair shop?" Richard felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. "Are you suggesting that—" "I'm suggesting maybe it's no coincidence Michael was left here. Maybe someone in the Thompson family knows something." "Emily, these are just assumptions." "Dad, the Thompsons have been pressuring you to sell the factory for months, and suddenly this happens. Don't you think it's suspicious?" Richard ran a hand through his hair, feeling a headache coming on. "I'll look into it, but let's not alarm Jessica for now." The next day, Richard decided to visit the repair shop where Jason worked. It was a small place on the outskirts of town, specializing in vintage cars. "I'm looking for a young man named Jason. Does he work here?" The shop owner, a greasy, heavy-set man, looked Richard up and down. "Who's asking?" "Richard Johnson from Johnson's Shoe Factory. It's a personal matter. Jason doesn't work here anymore. He left 2 months ago." "Do you know where he went?" "No idea, and I don't care to know. The boy ran out of here, said he was leaving town. He even left tools behind." "Did he say why?" The man hesitated before answering. "Well, Mr. Richard, Jason had been really nervous these past few weeks working here, said he'd gotten himself into a mess, and that his father would be furious if he found out." Richard felt a chill down his spine. "What kind of mess?" "I don't know, but he got a lot of calls from his dad, always seemed upset afterward, and one day he came in crying, saying he'd ruined everything." Richard thanked him for the information and left the auto repair shop with more questions than answers. If Jason was Thompson's son, why was he working in a simple repair shop? And why had he run away from town? Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, back to the story. That afternoon, Richard decided to call William Thompson directly, the businessman who'd been pressuring him to sell the factory. "Hello, Thompson. It's Richard Johnson." "Johnson, what a surprise. I hope you're calling about our offer." "Actually, it's about your son, Jason." The silence on the other end was too long. "My son? What about him?" "I need to talk to him about a personal matter. Do you know where I can find him?" "Richard, my son is traveling. Why do you want to talk to him?" "It's about a girl he met. Jessica." This time the silence was even heavier. "Richard, I think we should talk in person. Can you come to my office now?" An hour later, Richard was in William Thompson's luxurious office, facing a man in his 50s with graying hair and a calculating gaze. "Richard, I'll be direct. My son made a big mistake and I'm trying to handle it the best way possible." "What kind of mistake?" "He got involved with a very young girl. When he found out she was pregnant, he panicked and told me everything." "And what did you do?" William stood up and walked to the window, turning his back to Richard. "I sent him out of town, temporarily, until things calmed down." "Calm down how?" "William, the girl is 19 and raising a baby alone." "I know that, and that's why I'm arranging child support. I've already spoken to my lawyer." Richard stood up abruptly. "Child support? William, your son left that girl completely helpless. What do you want me to do? Force my son to marry her?" "I want him to take responsibility." William turned to face Richard. "Listen, Richard, I'll be frank. I found out the girl was working at your factory, and I also heard you and your wife took the baby into your home." "How did you know that?" "In a small town, news travels fast. And when a businessman's son gets a girl pregnant, everyone finds out. Richard felt something was very wrong with this conversation. William, are you telling me everything? I'm trying to handle this the best way for everyone, including pressuring me to sell my factory. The businessman returned to his chair and folded his hands on the desk. Richard, one thing has nothing to do with the other. Are you sure? Because it seems awfully convenient that right now, when I'm having financial trouble, this situation with your son comes up. What are you implying? I'm asking if you orchestrated all this to pressure me into selling the factory. William laughed, but it sounded forced. Richard, you're being paranoid. My son made a mistake, that's true, but it has nothing to do with our business. Then bring Jason back to talk to Jessica. That's not possible right now. Why not? Because he's still too confused, too upset. It wouldn't be good for anyone. Richard stood up to leave. William, I'm giving you 1 week to bring your son back. If you don't, I'll get a lawyer and we'll settle this in court. Richard, don't do this. We can work it out amicably. Amicably for who? For you who wants my factory, or for Jessica who's raising a child alone? Richard left William's office more confused than when he arrived. There was something very strange about the whole situation, but he couldn't figure out what. When he got home, he found Margaret playing with Michael in the garden. The baby laughed and reached his little hands out to her, and Margaret smiled in a way Richard hadn't seen in years. How did the talk with Jason's father go? Richard told her everything that had happened in William's office. Richard, do you really think that family planned all this? I don't know what to think anymore, Margaret, but something's off about this whole story. And Jessica, and has she decided if she'll accept our offer? Not yet. She said she'd give us an answer tomorrow. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about all the strange coincidences. Jessica working at his factory, the baby being left in the warehouse, his mother-in-law's blankets, Jason being the son of his biggest creditor. It was too much to be just coincidence. The next morning, Richard arrived at the factory and found Jessica waiting at the door with Michael in her arms. Mr. Richard, I've accepted your offer. I have nowhere else to go, and you've been so kind to me. That's great, Jessica. We'll start preparing the guest house for you today. There's something I need to tell you. What is it? Last night, Jason showed up at my place. Richard felt his blood run cold. What do you mean, showed up? He was waiting at the door when I got home. He said he heard I was working here and that you were helping with Michael. What else did he say? That his father doesn't know he's back, and that he wants to meet his son. Richard took a deep breath. Jessica, where is he now? He said he'd stay at a boarding house downtown. He gave me the address and asked me not to tell anyone he's back. Why doesn't he want his father to know? I don't know, but he was really nervous, really scared, not like he used to be. Richard took the address of the boarding house and decided to talk to Jason in person. Maybe the young man could clear some things up. The boarding house was a simple place on the outskirts of downtown. Richard found Jason in a small, stuffy room, a thin young man of about 20 with eyes that looked much older than his age. You're Richard Johnson. I am, and you're Jason Thompson. Jessica said you're helping her with Michael. We are. But I want to understand why you abandoned her and your son. Jason sat on the narrow bed, running his hands over his face. Mr. Richard, there are things you don't know, things even Jessica doesn't know. Then tell me, my father, he's not the man people think he is. What do you mean? When he found out Jessica was pregnant, he was furious, said I'd ruined everything, that I'd destroyed his plans. What plans? Jason hesitated before answering. My father's been trying to buy your factory for 2 years, but it's not just business. Then what is it? Because there's a huge aquifer running under your factory. A mineral water company wants to buy the land to build a bottling plant. Richard felt the ground disappear beneath him. How do you know this? Because my father told me. The company's already offered 5 times what the factory land is worth. But they need you to sell first. What does this have to do with you and Jessica? When my father found out about the pregnancy, he said it could complicate everything, that if Jessica's family knew she was involved with me, they could use it to pressure our family. Pressure how? If they found out about the water deal, They could demand a share of the profits in exchange for keeping quiet. Richard sat in the only chair in the room, processing the information. "Jason, has your family been trying to deceive me for 2 years? My father said it was just business, that in the end, everyone would come out ahead. And you believed him?" "I was young. I didn't understand business. I just wanted my father to be proud of me." "Then why did you run when you found out about the pregnancy?" "Because my father said if I told Jessica anything about the water deal, he'd make her and her family disappear from town." Richard felt a chill down his spine. "He threatened Jessica?" "Not directly, but he said he knew people who could handle problems, and I got scared." "So you ran away?" "I left and spent 2 months in a neighboring town, working at an auto repair shop. But I couldn't stop thinking about Jessica and the baby." "And why did you come back now?" "Because yesterday I called my mother, and she told me Jessica was working at your factory, and that you and Mrs. Gladys were helping with Michael. That's when I realized my father had lied." "Lied how?" "He said he'd sent money to Jessica, that she was well taken care of. But if she's having to work and accept help from you, it means she never got anything." Richard stood up, anger rising in his chest. "Jason, do you realize your running away left Jessica in a very difficult situation?" "I know, and I want to make it right. That's why I came back." "What do you plan to do?" "I want to take responsibility for my son. I want to take care of Jessica. And I want to tell everyone the truth about my father's plans." "What if your father follows through on his threats?" "Then we'll figure it out. But I can't keep running and leaving the people I love to fend for themselves." Richard looked at the young man and saw determination in his eyes. "Jason, if you really want to take responsibility, you'll have to do things the right way." "How?" "First, we'll talk to Jessica together. Then, you'll have to face your father. And finally, we'll settle this whole mess with the factory and the land. You'd help me." "I'll help, but not for you. I'll help for Jessica and Michael. And because no one gets to deceive me in my own business." That afternoon, Richard brought Jason to the factory. Jessica was cleaning the office when she saw the young man walk in. She dropped her rag and ran toward him but stopped halfway. "Jason, why did you come back?" "Because I was a coward, Jessica, and because I want to know my son." "Your son has a name. Michael." "Michael?" Jason repeated the name softly. "Like my grandfather." "It wasn't after your grandfather. It was after Mr. Richard's grandfather, who was a very good man." Jason looked at Richard, who gestured for them to talk alone. "Jessica, I know you must hate me." "I don't hate you, Jason, but I was very hurt. Can I explain why I ran?" Jessica sat in an office chair, and Jason told her the whole story about his father's pressure and threats. When he finished, she was crying. "Jason, you should have told me. We could have faced it together." "I know, but I was afraid. Afraid of my father. Afraid I couldn't protect you. And now, are you still afraid?" "I am. But I'm more afraid of losing you and Michael forever." Jessica wiped her tears and looked at him firmly. "If you want to be part of Michael's life, you'll have to prove you've changed. I can't just trust words anymore." "What do you want me to do?" "First, get a real job. Second, face your father and settle this whole mess. And third, prove you're here to stay, not to run at the first sign of trouble. And in the meantime, you can get to know your son. But slowly, no rushing." That same afternoon, Richard decided it was time to confront William Thompson with the truth. He called the businessman and scheduled an urgent meeting. "William, your son is back." "That's impossible. Jason is in New York. He's here in town, and he told me the whole truth about my factory's land and the mineral water business." The silence on the other end of the line was long. "Richard, I think there's been a misunderstanding." "There's no misunderstanding. You tried to deceive me for 2 years, and on top of that, you threatened a 19-year-old girl." "I never threatened anyone." "Then come to the factory right now, and let's settle this once and for all." An hour later, William arrived at the factory with a lawyer. Richard was waiting with Jason and Emily. "Dad," Jason stood up when he saw William enter. "Jason, what are you doing here?" I told you to stay in New York until I sorted things out. These things aren't yours to sort out, Dad. They're mine. William glared at Richard angrily. Richard, you turned my son against me. Your son came back because he wants to take responsibility for the child he had with Jessica, and I support that decision. What about the business? Richard stood up and faced William. What business? You mean the scheme to deceive me and steal my land? No one was stealing anything. It was a legitimate deal. It would have been legitimate if you'd told me about the mineral water company from the start. And would you have sold? Maybe, but for a fair price, not the measly amount you were offering. William's lawyer stepped toward Richard. Mr. Johnson, my client is willing to make a fairer offer now that the cards are on the table. I'm not interested in offers from someone who tried to deceive me. Dad, Jason interrupted the argument. Stop this. Mr. Richard gave us a chance when he could have called the police or Child Protective Services. It's time to do the right thing. William looked at his son as if seeing him for the first time. Jason, you don't understand the consequences. Yes, I do. I understand I have a child to raise and a woman who gave me a second chance, and I won't throw that away for money. What if I cut off your allowance, stop paying for your studies? Jason smiled for the first time since arriving. Then I'll work and pay for my own studies, like everyone else does. Richard watched the argument between father and son and saw that Jason had truly matured. William, I'll make you an offer. What offer? You stop pressuring me to sell my factory. I won't sell the land to anyone now. In return, Jason can work here with me, learn the business, and take responsibility for Jessica and Michael. What if the mineral water company approaches you directly? Then I'll decide whether to negotiate or not. But no pressure, no lies, and no threats. William glanced at his lawyer, who nodded in approval. And what do you get out of this? I get a young, motivated employee. I get the chance to help a family come together. And I get the respect of knowing I did the right thing. Jason stepped closer to Richard. Mr. Richard, I accept the job, but I want to start at the bottom, learn everything from scratch. You'll start in production, just like the other employees, no special treatment. Perfect. William tucked the documents into his briefcase and stood up. Fine, we'll do things your way, Richard. But I hope you remember this conversation when the water company comes knocking. I'll remember. And I'll also remember how you tried to deceive me. After William left, Richard, Jason, and Emily stayed talking in the office. Dad, are you sure this was the right decision? Emily asked. I am. Sometimes it's better to lose money than to lose your conscience. What if the water company really does come? Then we'll talk. But if we sell, it'll be for a fair price and with conditions that protect the workers. Jason looked at Richard with gratitude. Mr. Richard, how can I thank you for all this? By being a good father to Michael and a good partner to Jessica, and by working hard here at the factory. You can count on me. I won't let you down. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now back to the story. That night, Richard came home and found Margaret giving Michael a bath in the kitchen. The baby was laughing and playing with the water while Margaret softly sang a lullaby. How was the meeting with the Thompsons? Richard shared every detail of the conversation, and Margaret listened quietly. Richard, you did the right thing. But what if we get too attached to Michael, and later Jessica and Jason want to start their own family? Then we'll be happy for them and keep being borrowed grandparents. Borrowed grandparents? Yeah, Margaret. We can love this boy as if he were our grandson, but without forgetting he has biological parents. Margaret picked Michael up, and he immediately nestled into her neck. I think I'm already attached, Richard. Me too. But that's not a bad thing. It's good to have more people to love. The following week, the factory routine changed completely. Jessica moved into the guest house with Michael, Jason started working in production, and Margaret began helping with the baby during Jessica's shifts. Richard watched it all and realized how that little child had transformed not just his life, but everyone's around him. Dad, we need to talk, Emily said, appearing in the office one Friday morning. What now? Did the water company reach out to you? Not yet. Why? Because I got a call from a lawyer in New York. They want to set up a meeting. And what did you say? That you'd think about it. But Dad, they're offering a lot of money, a whole lot. Richard leaned back in his chair. Emily, money isn't everything in life. I know. But with that money, you could pay off all the debts, renovate the factory, give raises to all the employees. And then what? What happens to the factory when they start extracting water here? I don't know. Maybe we could negotiate to keep it running. Or maybe they shut everything down and let everyone go. Emily sat across from her father's desk. Dad, at least hear their proposal. It doesn't hurt to listen. Richard thought for a few minutes. Fine. Set up the meeting. But on one condition, Jason and Gladys will be there too. Why? Because Jason knows his father's schemes and Gladys represents the senior employees. I want everyone to know what's happening. The meeting was scheduled for the following Monday. 3 men in suits arrived from New York in a black car, looking very important. Mr. Johnson, I'm Dr. Marcus, representing Crystal Springs, Inc. The oldest of the 3 introduced himself. Pleasure. This is Jason, our employee, and Gladys, our supervisor. The men seemed surprised Richard had included employees in the meeting, but said nothing. Mr. Johnson, let's get straight to the point. We're interested in buying your land for $20 million. Richard nearly choked on his coffee. It was 10 times what William had offered. 20 million? It's a very generous offer for a plot this size in a small town. And what happens to the factory? Well, that would be up to you. It could keep running in another location. Jason leaned forward. And the employees? What happens to them during the move? That would be Mr. Johnson's responsibility. Gladys, who had been quiet until then, finally spoke. Excuse me, Doctor. Can I ask something? Of course. Why do you specifically want this land? There are other places in the region with groundwater. Dr. Marcus exchanged glances with his colleagues. It's a matter of strategic location. Strategic how? Well, this property has easy access to the main highway and... Doctor, Richard interrupted, let me be direct. How many water plants are you planning to build here? What do you mean? I want to know if it's just a small bottling facility or a large industrial complex. Dr. Marcus hesitated before answering. It would be a mid-sized complex with the capacity to supply the entire Midwest region. Richard looked at Jason and Gladys, who seemed just as surprised as he was. Doctor, a complex that size will completely change our town. Mr. Johnson, this could be very good for the local economy. Lots of jobs, more business activity, and a lot of change. Our town has 15,000 people. An industrial complex that size could also bring problems. What kind of problems? Traffic, pollution, changes to people's way of life? Dr. Marcus stood and walked to the window overlooking the factory yard. Mr. Johnson, you have a factory that's struggling financially. With our proposal, you could solve all your problems and even get rich. And what if I don't want to get rich at the expense of my town? What do you mean? Richard also stood. Doctor, this factory employs 50 families. It may not seem like much to you, but it's important to our town. And this is a family business built by my father through hard work. Mr. Johnson, you could use the money to open a bigger factory somewhere else. But it wouldn't be the same. Jason stepped closer to Richard. Mr. Richard, can I make a suggestion? Go ahead. Why don't you propose a partnership instead of a sale? Dr. Marcus looked at Jason with interest. What do you mean, young man? You could use part of the land for the water plant, and the shoe factory could keep operating on the other side. It would be a partnership. And what's in it for us? You'd get access to the land without having to buy all of it, plus you'd have a local partner to help with labor and logistics. Dr. Marcus whispered with his colleagues for a few minutes. It's an interesting idea, but we'd need to study the feasibility. Richard sensed an opportunity. Doctor, I'll make a counteroffer. You study the possibility of a partnership, and I'll study the possibility of a sale. But I want written guarantees about what happens to the employees and the town. What kind of guarantees? First, that all my current employees will have guaranteed jobs, whether here or at your new company. Second, that you'll invest in infrastructure for the town. And third, that you'll respect the environment and the quality of life for residents. Dr. Marcus wrote everything down in a notebook. Those are complex conditions, Mr. Johnson. We'll need time to review. How much time? A month? 2 weeks. That's enough time for you to consult your superiors. Fine, 2 weeks. After the men left, Richard, Jason, and Gladys kept talking about the meeting. Mr. Richard, do you think they'll accept the conditions? Gladys asked. I don't know, but if they don't, at least we made our values clear. And if they do, Jason asked, then we make a decision as a family. All of us, including the employees. That night, Richard told Margaret everything and asked for her opinion. Richard, 20 million is a lot of money. It is. It would solve all our problems and leave plenty to spare. But you don't seem excited. Because I'm not. Margaret, that factory is more than just a business to me. It's my father's legacy, the place where I met important people, where we built our life. What if we could have both, the money and the factory? What do you mean? That idea Jason had about a partnership. It looks like this might work out. But it would be a lot of change, Margaret. Our quiet life here, the small town where everyone knows each other. Richard, change isn't always bad. Sometimes we need to step out of our comfort zone. And Michael, what about this whole situation with Michael? Margaret smiled. Michael will grow up in a prosperous city with more opportunities. Isn't that what all parents want for their children? Richard realized Margaret had referred to Michael as if he were truly their son. Margaret, are you thinking about the possibility of officially adopting Michael? I am. If Jessica and Jason agree, not as a replacement for his biological parents, but as his official grandparents. Official grandparents? Yes, Richard. We could be the grandparents Michael never had. The grandparents we never got to be. The next day, Richard decided to talk to Jessica and Jason about the situation. Jessica, Jason, I need to talk to you about a few things. They gathered in the guest house where Jessica was living with Michael. The baby was asleep in the crib Richard and Margaret had bought. First, I want to know how you're feeling with everything that's happened. Well, Mr. Richard, Jessica replied, for the first time in months I feel like I have a real family. And you, Jason? Same. Working here, being able to see Michael every day, knowing Jessica is okay, it's more than I could have hoped for. Good. Now I want to talk about the future. Do you have plans to get married? Jason and Jessica exchanged a glance and smiled. Actually, Mr. Richard, we've been talking about that, Jason said. And have you reached any conclusions? We do want to get married, Jessica answered. But not because we have to, because we want to build a real family. And when do you plan to do it? Once I've saved up enough for a simple wedding, Jason said. Richard smiled. What if I told you Margaret and I would like to help with the wedding? How so? Jessica asked. Like you were our own children. A beautiful wedding with family gathered, a celebration. Mr. Richard, we can't accept that, Jason began. Why not? Because you've already done so much for us. Richard stood and walked over to the crib where Michael slept. You know something? This little boy has changed our lives more than you can imagine. Margaret and I could never have children. And now suddenly we don't just have a grandson, we have a son and a daughter-in-law too. Son and daughter-in-law? Jessica asked. That's how we see you, like the family we never had. Jason stepped closer to Richard. Mr. Richard, there's something I'd like to ask. What is it? When Michael grows up, I'd like him to call me Dad, but also call you Grandpa, and Mrs. Margaret, Grandma. Richard felt his eyes fill with tears. Jason, it would be an honor. At that moment, Michael woke up and began to cry. Jessica moved to pick him up, but Richard got there first. Let me, he said, lifting Michael into his arms. The baby stopped crying immediately and looked at Richard with his green eyes, as if recognizing he was home. Grandpa's here, Michael, Richard whispered. Grandpa's here. 2 weeks later, Dr. Marcus returned with a detailed proposal. The company was willing to form a partnership, buying half the land and keeping the shoe factory running on the other half. Mr. Johnson, our proposal is this. We'll buy 50% of the land for $10 million, and you'll keep the factory on the other 50%. What about the employees? All retained with adjusted salaries, plus we'll need to hire another 100 people for the water factory. And the town's infrastructure? We'll invest $2 million in improvements, paving, sanitation, a new health clinic. Richard glanced at Emily, who was attending the meeting. And how long to implement everything? 2 years. One for construction, another for full operation. I need to talk to my family and my employees before deciding. Of course. But we need an answer by the end of the month. That afternoon, Richard called all the employees for a meeting in the factory yard. He explained the whole situation and asked for everyone's opinion. "Mr. Richard," said Gladys, "I speak for all of us. We want you to do what you think is best. We trust you. But I want to hear your opinions too." "Look, Mr. Richard," said John, a long-time employee, "if this will bring improvements to the town and jobs for our children, I think it's good." "And the rest of you?" Richard asked the others. One by one, the employees shared similar views. Everyone saw opportunities in the proposal, as long as job security was guaranteed. That evening, Richard gathered the whole family in the main house: Margaret, Emily, Jessica, Jason, and Michael. "Family, it's time to decide the future of the factory." Richard explained all the details of the proposal and the employees' opinions. "And you, Richard? What do you think?" asked Margaret. "I think it's a chance to grow without losing who we are. 10 million is a lot of money. It'll solve our problems and give everyone security for the future. And the factory? It'll keep running, just with more resources and possibilities." Emily spoke up. "Dad, I think we should accept. It's our chance to modernize everything and secure the company's future for the next generation." "Jason, what's your take?" "Mr. Richard, I think it's a great opportunity. And if it works out, Michael will grow up in a thriving town." "And you, Jessica?" "I trust you, Mr. Richard. You've always made the right decisions so far." Richard looked at Margaret. "Margaret?" "Richard, I think your father would be proud. He always said what matters isn't the size of the business, but the positive impact it has on people's lives. Then it's settled. We'll accept the offer." The next day, Richard called Dr. Marcus and agreed to the partnership. The contracts were signed a week later, with all the guarantees Richard had insisted on. 2 months after signing, the town was bustling with infrastructure projects. The Johnson Shoe Factory had received new equipment and hired more workers. Jessica and Jason set their wedding for December, with a simple ceremony at the town church. Richard and Margaret organized a party in the factory hall for all the employees and their families. "Mr. Richard," Jason approached him on the wedding day, "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done for us." "Jason, you know I should be thanking you too, right?" "How so?" "You brought joy into our home. Michael gave us the chance to be grandparents, and you gave us the chance to have a complete family." During the party, Richard looked around, Jessica dancing in her wedding dress, Jason smiling like never before, Michael asleep in Margaret's arms, Emily chatting excitedly with the employees about the factory's expansion plans. "Richard," Margaret came closer, "are you happy?" "Very happy, Margaret. Very happy." "You know what makes me happiest?" "What?" "Seeing how things sometimes work out in ways we never imagined." "How so?" "We wanted children, and we ended up with a whole family. You wanted to save the factory, and it's thriving more than ever. And Michael? What about Michael?" "Michael ended up bringing everyone together. If it weren't for him, none of this would have happened." Richard looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in Margaret's arms. "That's true. This boy was our lucky charm." "It wasn't luck, Richard, it was fate." 6 months later, the water factory was up and running, creating jobs for the whole region. The shoe factory was also thriving, now with new markets and products. Jessica had gone back to school, taking a technical course in business administration at night. Jason had been promoted to production supervisor, and Michael, now 1 year old, was already crawling around the factory like he owned the place. "Dad," Emily appeared in the office one morning, "I have news." "What news?" "I'm pregnant." Richard nearly spilled his coffee. "Pregnant? Since when?" "Since last month." And before you ask, it's Mark's, that engineer from the water company. Emily, why didn't you tell me sooner? Because I wanted to make sure everything was okay with the baby. Richard stood up and hugged his daughter. Emily, what wonderful news. Dad, I think Michael will have to share his grandparents' attention now. Nonsense, Grandpa and Grandma have enough love for all their grandchildren. That night, when Richard shared the news with Margaret, she burst into happy tears. Richard, do you realize what's happening? What? 2 years ago, we were a childless couple with a failing factory. Now we have a grandson, a son and a daughter-in-law, another grandchild on the way, and a thriving business. Yeah, life sure takes unexpected turns. They're not just turns, Richard, it's growth. We were ready for all of this, we just didn't know it. A year later, when Richard and Margaret's second grandchild was born, a girl they named Helen after her grandmother, the whole family gathered at the hospital. Michael, now 2 years old, looked curiously at his little sister. Grandpa, he said, trying to pronounce the word correctly. Tiny baby. Yes, Michael. Now, you're the big brother. You take care? We'll all take care of her, Michael. In a family, everyone looks after each other. 3 years after the day Richard found Michael in the warehouse, the factory was considered a model of industrial cooperation in the region. The town had grown in a planned way, keeping its small-town charm, but with modern infrastructure. Richard, now 50, shared the company's management with Emily and Jason. Jessica had graduated in business administration and worked in the finance department. Margaret coordinated a social project for employee daycare. Grandpa, Michael, now 5, appeared in the office. Mom says come for lunch. I'll be right there, Michael. What's special today? Cake. It's the anniversary of the day you found me. Richard smiled. Jessica had started the tradition of celebrating the day Michael was found in the warehouse, like a second birthday. And you remember that story? I do. You found me in a box, and then you became my grandpa. How does that make you feel? Michael thought for a moment, like children do when they want to give an important answer. Happy. Really happy. Because I have a dad, a mom, a grandpa, a grandma, and a sister. That's lots of people who love me. Richard picked Michael up. Yes, that's a lot of people. And you know what? What? We're all really happy to have you, too. As they walked home, Richard thought about how life had taken unpredictable turns. A baby abandoned in a warehouse had become the center of a family that formed in an unconventional way, but with so much love. The factory thrived, the town grew, and he had the complete family he'd always dreamed of, just in a way he'd never imagined possible. Grandpa, Michael interrupted his thoughts. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why do you think my real mom left me in the warehouse? Richard stopped walking and knelt to Michael's level. Michael, your real mom is Jessica. She raised you, loves you, and takes care of you every day. But the lady who had me in her belly? Oh, her. I think she knew you'd find a family who would love you very much. Sometimes people make hard choices out of love. You're not mad at her? No, Michael, actually I'm grateful to her. Why? Because without her I'd never have met you, and you changed my life for the better. Michael smiled and hugged Richard around the neck. I love you too, Grandpa. At that moment, Richard understood that all the hardships, all the problems, and all the scares he had been through were worth it, because they led to that moment, to that family, to that happiness. When they arrived home, they found the whole family gathered in the garden, Margaret playing with Helen, Emily and Mark chatting about future plans, Jessica and Jason preparing lunch together. The main family is here, Jessica shouted when she saw Richard and Michael. Main family? Richard laughed. Yeah, because without you two, none of this would exist. They all sat at the table, as they did every Sunday. Richard looked around and saw happy faces, lively conversations, and children laughing. Everyone, Richard said, tapping his glass to get their attention, I'd like to make a little toast. Speech, speech, Jason shouted. Easy now, no speech, Richard said. I just want to say that 3 years ago, when I found Michael in the warehouse, I thought I was saving a child. But the truth is, he's the one who saved us. He saved our family, our factory, our lives. Grandpa's getting emotional, Emily teased. Let him talk, Margaret said, smiling. I want to thank God for bringing Michael into our lives, and I want to thank all of you for embracing this crazy family we've become. Crazy why? Jessica asked. Because we're not an ordinary family. We're a family that chose each other, formed out of love, not just blood. And that's a bad thing, Jason asked. That's wonderful, Richard replied, because it proves that family is whoever loves you, cares for you, and stands by you. And you're the best family I could ever ask for. Everyone raised their glasses to toast, including Michael with his juice. To the Johnson-Williams family, Margaret cheered. To the Johnson-Williams family, everyone repeated. As they toasted and laughed, Richard felt a peace in his heart he hadn't felt in many years. Life had given him far more than he ever dreamed, a united family, a thriving business, and the certainty that he had made a difference in so many lives. After lunch, Michael came up to him. Grandpa, when I grow up, I want to work at the factory too. Why? Because that's where you found me, and because everyone there helps each other, just like a family. Richard hugged his grandson and thought about how this boy, who had arrived in a cardboard box, had become the greatest treasure of his life. Years later, when Michael would tell this story to his own children, he would always end by saying, "And that's how I learned that sometimes you find family in the most unexpected places, and that love doesn't need an explanation, just an open heart to receive it." End of story. Now tell me, what did you think of this story? Do you believe destiny can bring people together like this? Which part moved you the most? Leave a sincere comment about how you felt following Richard, Margaret, Jessica, Jason, and especially little Michael's journey. Your opinion means so much to us. Don't forget to like and subscribe, so you won't miss other heartwarming stories that will touch your soul. Thank you for being here with us.